Good morning. Can you hear me? We are so glad that you are here with us today. We're both very passionate about the importance of teaching social emotional skills. And my social emotional skills were tested when I walked in, and they said, "Oh, you're being videotaped." And I'm like, "Oh, didn't know that one." So I'm working on my self-efficacy, becoming more comfortable with this, and my self-regulation, trying to regulate those emotions, slow down and speak slowly, because when I get nervous, I talk very fast. So we are, again, so glad that you are here with us today, because this topic is so very important. So we're going to kind of get into our presentation. And we'll say, oh, there we go. It works. Isn't that amazing? I love the power of technology. If you can't read the quote because you're too far back, I'm going to read it to you because I think it's so very important. It says, if a child can do advanced math, speak 3 languages, or receive top grades, but can't manage their emotions, practice conflict resolution, or handle stress, none of the other stuff is really going to matter. And that is really the heart and soul of what social emotional learning is about. So we're going to kind of think about how you can incorporate that in what you do, and you as especially transition educators. It's so important for our students to be able to learn these skills while they're still in school, and they work so well with transition. Like every training, we have norms. Again, if you have questions, please ask them. We'll try to have some time at the end. But again, if you have questions, probably somebody else does. Because we're all on camera, we're going to ask you to, limit sidebar conversations. And we're going to ask you to listen with an open heart and an open mind, because we know sometimes social emotional learning kind of is dissonant for some people. It's kind of hard to get past. Right now, it's a political minefield when you talk about social emotional learning. But when we think about whether or not it's a school's place to do this, we think about if our kids can't handle their emotions, if they can't handle stress, if they cannot regulate their emotional responses, if they can't speak up for themselves, they're not going to feel safe. And we know research says if they're not safe, they won't learn. So, whatever the political world says, I do think it's a school's place to focus in on social emotional learning. Oh, went the wrong way. All right. These are our learning objectives for the time you have with us. Again, we're going to focus on 4 what we call foundational competencies: self-efficacy, self-regulation, assertiveness, and conflict management. And we're going to talk about why it's important and why it makes sense that we embed this learning into our curriculum. And most importantly, we're going to talk about where to find information and how to get additional training if you're interested. Oh, wrong way. I will get this right yet. My self-efficacy will improve. All right, I'm a huge listener of podcasts. And back in December of 2020, I was listening to a podcast by Brene Brown. And it was talking about kind of getting through the pandemic and how do we handle that situation. And she was talking about a quote in a book called Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. And the authors were responding to the quote, "History is a study of surprises." And what they said was, this line captures the world in which we live. We are living history, surprise after surprise after surprise. And just when we think we have had all the big surprises for a while, along comes another one. If the first 2 decades of the 21st century have taught us anything, it's that uncertainty is chronic, instability is permanent, disruption is common, and we can neither predict nor govern events. There will be no new normal. There will only be a continuous series of not normal episodes, defying prediction and unforeseen by most of us until they happen. That just took me back. I stopped and re-listened to it and re-listened to it. The last end of the quote is on the slide. I want you to turn and talk to the neighbor. How does that make you feel when you read that and hear that? All right, we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to bring you back. Does anybody want to share how that made them feel when you read that?
So what I had said was I felt like the last sentence was applicable even before COVID. I'm kind of a baby teacher. COVID was my first year teaching. Great first year. But even in teacher college, they're like, you got to be flexible. There's no normal day. And if you expect there to be a normal day, it's going to be 3 times as abnormal as you could imagine.
Great, I love that. And as I read this, and when I think about this, I mean, it really freaked me out because I was ready for the new normal. I was ready to go back to my office. I was ready to go back to presenting virtually. I was ready to see everybody in my office again. And those days, it will never be the same. It will never be the same because things have changed and we won't go back to that new normal. And if we think about the things that have happened in the last year and a half, talking about things that are not normal events, we have, we're still battling COVID. We've had over 185 million COVID cases, in our country. We've had over 1 million deaths. In Missouri, we've had over 28,000 deaths. That wipes out the entire county that I live in terms of things like that. We've had 246 mass shootings so far this year. We have the Russians invading Ukraine. Those who are watching the January 6th hearings, there's more and more information coming out that's unsettling. We have heat waves in Antarctica. And if that's not enough, we've got monkeypox coming for us. It's like, what next? So again, think about how do our kids handle it when faced with uncertainty, instability, disruption, non-normal activities. When we as adults struggle, think about how difficult it is for our students. I want you to think about the effects of the pandemic on the mental health of our students. And I'm going to give you the research, but you guys are on the front line. You know what the effects were on our students. According to research, more than 25% of students at the high school reported worsening social emotional health. Over 20% of parents, students ages 5 through 12, reported worsening conditions for their children. The number of students receiving mental health services dropped by 50%. So just as the crisis ramped up for our kids, the help decreased. There was a recent study that just came out last week that said that contracting COVID-19 can nearly triple a child's risk of mental health problems. So let that sink in terms of what that means. A Surgeon General's advisory is a public health statement that calls the America, our people, to let them know there's something going on, there's kind of a crisis. And it provides recommendations that how it should be addressed. In December of 2021, the Surgeon General had a mental health advisory issued. In the introduction, Dr. Murthy, our Surgeon General, wrote, "The challenges that today's generation faces are unprecedented and uniquely hard to navigate, and the effects of these challenges have had on their mental health is devastating." So our government is recognizing that there's a mental health crisis for our students. They talked about some of the manifestations of, again, the mental health crisis. And again, I don't need to tell you folks, you all are the ones dealing with these kids. In terms of just the anxiety, the depressive symptoms, the acting out behaviors, the impulsivity, the increase in suicide and suicide attempts. All the reports also have recommendations. When you look at the recommendations from the Surgeon General's report, it talks specifically about teaching students social and emotional skills. So again, we're hearing from many different sides that this is really important for our students, especially now. So our focus today is going to be on the skills that matter, the idea of teaching interpersonal skills in any classroom. We are using the CCC framework that was put out by Dr. Amy Gomer Erickson and Patty Noonan. And we will share with you some of their resources. They have many really good free resources. For those of you that really feel like they need to address social emotional skills for your students, there are 3 options for you. We're going to kind of go through what each of those options are. The first is some free available training that you can do on your own, or if you're a director or a process coordinator, if you want to do for your teachers, for your paras, there's training on what's called the virtual learning platform. And we'll talk about how to access that. Each of the RPDCs across the state are doing social emotional learning academies. And there's also more in-depth social emotional training that's available. And I'll talk about each one of those a little bit more specifically to kind of get an idea of what would be most helpful for you. Again, the virtual learning platform has information, modules that are up there. Right now, the self-regulation and self-efficacy are the modules that are up there that are available for you. They are free and open to all Missouri educators. You can choose to go through it yourself and learn about it on your own, or again, you can work with a group and go through the modules as a group. They're designed to be about 4 to 5 hours long. You have all the resources that you need. You have the PowerPoints, you have the scripts, you have the training materials, the resources, educator workbooks. They're all there for you.
Mo.gov, and then on the site it'll ask you to sign in for virtual learning platform. Every person in the state, every teacher in the state of Missouri has access to the virtual learning platform. So you'll go in and it'll be a column and it'll just say virtual learning platform information, and you can click on it, and once you're registered you can have access. But every teacher in the state of Missouri has access to that. And if you're a district continuous improvement school, you have access to the VLP as well.
You may have to work with your district to get access, because a lot of times you have to have that login. But it's designed for every teacher that's interested to be able to go in and get it that way. We talked about the academies. We will have all the RPDCs will have a one-day academy to provide training. Right now we have the self-regulation, self-efficacy, and assertiveness done. We should get conflict management up and going in the fall. But again, it will be a one-day training. They will kind of work with you on making you aware of the resources, giving you ideas of things that you can do in your classroom to work on these competencies. And then what we have is kind of more in-depth training. This week, you have to have a recognized trainer to do the training. It is a multi-day training, but it will really focus on how to get more in depth, how to embed these competencies into what you do. Because really, it's not enough to teach about self-regulation. You need to have kids practice self-regulation. It's not enough to teach about assertiveness. They need to practice being assertive. So again, it allows you to kind of begin to understand how to embed these activities into what you're already doing. And again, the idea is that you get the coaching, you get the training, the consultant will work with you and do additional coaching. You also get access to the curriculum or the activities. Now, Susan and I aren't making any money off this. And, you know, most of what you can get is free. if you go to the in-depth training, you'll get the activities free. But if you don't have the time and can't make it work out, we'll show you where you can purchase it. It's $16 for a PDF, so you can do your entire school for $16. So nobody's getting rich off this. But again, it just kind of works, kind of helps you, kind of guide you through the process. If you're looking at doing it, in a building, we would encourage the in-depth SEL training. And again, be aware that what we're doing in social emotional learning is not by itself. It's not, you're not doing anything that really is different. There are a lot of initiatives that support this. MSIP 6, which is our accreditation system in Missouri, is rolling out this year. Half the schools in Missouri will go through MSIP 6 this year, the other half next year. For the first time ever, social emotional learning is required. So this is something that is going to be a part of the MSIP anyway. So this is a really good time. Not only are things aligning up as far as what our kids are going through, the state is finally recognizing the importance of it. If you are a PBIS or PBS school, again, this instruction is good Tier 1 instruction. We talk about in PBS, what are the expected behaviors? But we don't talk about what if you can't do that? How do you work on getting better at that behavior? Very good Tier 1 instruction for all students. It works really well with trauma-informed, if you work a lot in trauma-informed. Again, good Tier 1 instruction. And it's also aligned to the school counseling comprehensive standards. So in some schools, we have counselors that administer the activities, and the teachers reinforce it in their classroom. So it can be done lots of different ways.
Oh, no, I get to try and screw this up. Also, trauma-informed schools. So if you're working in that area as well, trauma-informed can also benefit through social-emotional learning. So one of the things that starts out with any of the competencies that are on our wheel, we start with intrapersonal, and intrapersonal means within yourself. So there's certain things within ourselves that we can control. When we look at the second domain, it's called interpersonal, and that's communication with each other, how we behave, what do we do, how we avoid certain conflicts. And then the last one is cognitive, which is always going to be yellow on the wheel. And we do not, in terms of SEL training, we do not look at the cognitive part because that is done primarily through school. That's your education. And so when we look at these, there's a color wheel. And if you look closely, you'll see that it's blended. And I know you can't read it far away, but you'll see that in intrapersonal, we have self-regulation. That's controlling your emotions, controlling how you behave, controlling what you can do. Self-efficacy, self, again. When you look at interpersonal, you look at assertiveness. You look at empathy. You look at conflict management. You look at communication because you're talking to one another. You're building those relationships. Whereas cognitive, it's how we think, it's problem solving. We do those things within a school automatically in the content that we teach, or at least we hope we do. So when we talk about self-regulation or assertiveness or self-efficacy or conflict management, you'll notice that they blend all in the middle. They have like a blending. But we're talking about a competency, and it means to be competent in that area. You may know about it, but you're competent when you use it. And you build that practice over time. And you get feedback, not great job, but authentic feedback that's descriptive. How would you go about changing this the next time? What would you do differently? You make a reflection. I know as a former teacher, one of the things I always did, and I finally cleaned it out of my house, I saved all my plan books. I know I'm a nerd. I saved all my plan books for all the years I taught, up to like, I kept them like 5 years, and then I pitched the other 5. So I would go back and look in my plan book because it would say reflect. Reflect on what I did. What do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to change? How can I give better feedback to my students as well as feedback to myself? What worked, what didn't work? So I encourage you not only to think about that for yourself, but start practicing some good feedback amongst us. So this is the what. This is what we do. It's a competency building. So these, as Mary Beth said earlier, we do 4 basic foundational pieces: self-regulation, self-efficacy, assertiveness, and conflict management. And you can see that empathy is embedded. But when you look at this screen, you can see that if you have self-awareness and you talk about self-regulation and self-efficacy, you're also persevering. You're also doing self-care. You're also including ethics. When you look at assertiveness for interpersonal, we're developing teamwork, networking. We're talking about conflict management that also relates to communication. So they're not a separate piece. They're also in everything we do every day. And these are skills our students need. So again, it answers the what. Here's the focus on why. Why do we need these? Look at the list of focus on interpersonal and intrapersonal. This is what the research says. Are there ones up there that you don't agree with your students? We know that intrapersonal competencies, students who, I just read this the other day, students who drop out of school and do not complete earn less than $260,000 over a lifetime in lower wage skills. So we want them to earn higher salaries. We want them to advance in their careers. We want them to avoid drug use and avoid that prison to pipeline. We also found that working on intrapersonal, keeping in mind it's conflict management, bullying, reduction in bullying. And that's why it works well with PBS. When you work on your interpersonal self-efficacy, self-regulation, you do work on studying more. Not just studying, and when kids say, oh, I'm going to study more, what does that look like? Is it 5 minutes more? Is it 10 minutes more? Is it a group study, or just reading notes, or just rereading? What are they doing to make it better? We also want them to become, more engaged in school. We want them to improve their attendance. What's one of the things PBS looks for and Trauma Informed look at attendance rate. They look at tardies. They look at absenteeism. They notice what hour they're gone. Is it mainly Friday 7th hour? Is it Monday 1st hour? You know your students. So again, these are all competencies that we want to engage with. Mary Beth mentioned that it is a systematic instruction and application. So when you look at either the VLP or as we're going through this, when we talk about an academy, you're going to get an overview, much like today, but more in depth. But if you decide to train with us, Mary Beth is certified in assertiveness, self-efficacy, and self-regulation. I am all 3 again. So I'm in the Southeast region. So we can come and do a full day with your staff. And it can be, I've worked with a district this past year. We started out in September and we just finished the whole year at the end in May. They had great success with their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They did it during their advisory hour. There are lessons that you can use that come in the workbook, but you don't have to use them. You use what fits for you. You use pieces of it. You can adapt it. It's, we want you to do it where it's embedded, it's natural. And you'll see as we explain all the competencies. But it is systematically providing instruction and application for all kids, not just general ed students, special ed students as well, who also need these skills as well. They're not new, they support learning, and they are ways in which a school can continue in developing their students. I don't like this clicker. So why should we teach competencies intentionally and systematically? Once you learn something, it becomes automatic. It becomes a routine. It becomes learned practice. How many of us have driven to work and not known how we got there? Or home for work. Or you get to work and you think, did I turn off that curling iron? Or did I turn off the washer? Those things you don't think about because it's done. You just do it. So these become ingrained. They're embedded in what we do. We know that it takes practice. How many of us took a long time to learn how to drive? How many of us passed that test on the first go around? I don't really want to see your hands because I did not. No. Passed the written test, not the driving test. The first time, because I kind of went through a stop sign and a crosswalk. But nobody told me. I didn't know. I lived out in the country and I had to take the test in the city. I'm like, really? We don't have that. We're just polite. We just go. So I kind of had to practice more driving in the city. Competencies are complex. They're easy to define. We can talk about what, for us, self-regulation, it's make a plan. We made a plan to be here. We monitor our plan. We make changes if it needs to be changed. And then we reflect on it. That's simple. We can all do that. How many of us do it? We skip parts. So they're very delineated and they're complex to teach to our students. We also know that it's systematic. We want them to do it in a systematic manner. I can't make this thing work. I don't know why. Do I beam it back to you? That could be why. It's still not clicking. There. So when you see this, you will see this skill, moving from skill to competency. This is how we do it. You learn the what, you learn the why, and now we're talking about the how. Anytime you learn something new, it's a skill. And until you use it over and over and over, until it becomes a routine, then you have mastered competency. So when we first look at these 6 steps, we have to understand, have the students understand the competency and the components. We have to apply it to them personally. We have to make sure that they reflect on what was good and what was bad. What's their strength? What's their limitation? We also have to have them practice, not 5 days a week and then we're done. It's throughout the whole year. You go back. Then we provide feedback to the students and then we ask them to reflect. So these 6 steps are even part of our daily teaching that we do with everyday teaching. You introduce a new subject, a new content, a new concept. You don't say, okay, here's how you do it, and now let's go. I'm horrible at math, so I need all 6 steps, and I need a lot on 4 and 5. because I'm not going to get it. So if we just jump from one introduction until the student's reflection, we haven't taught them the steps in which to become ingrained. So we really want that to be part of it. I am aiming at you, but it is not going. Oh. So when we look at multi-tiered system of support, this is also how. We know that in Tier 1 base, our Tier 1 system is 80% of the students, and 80% should be 100%. We have academic, social, and behavior. We also know that Tier 2, 15% of our kids aren't getting it, so we need to have a multi-tiered system of support. But then we have Tier 3, and those are our most critical kids. They're not getting it in Gen Ed, they're not getting it in Sped Ed, they need more practice. And that should be the way it is. However, many of our systems are flipped, where you have 80%. And so again, we want to make sure that we're talking about behavior as well as social, and that's where this all comes in with social emotional learning. What you're going to find in all of these, all four of the competencies, you're going to see that there's a poster for each one. They're all different. Detailed lessons. They have lessons 1 through 8 that take you systematically through the entire lesson. You can choose the activities. There are anywhere from 5 to 9 different activities for each lesson. You choose what's going to best work for your students. You don't have to do all 9 lessons. You can just, you do all 9 lessons, but you don't have to do all 9 activities. If they get it on the first 2, move to lesson 2 after a while, then come back, introduce lesson 1 again, just kind of to refresh who can name what happens with, or who can give me the 4 parts. There's a pre-K to 12 sequence for each one of the 4 areas. And one of the things, as you'll see it, it'll have like what happens in, or where they should be at pre-K to 1, 2, 3, etc. And you will find that many of your students are back at grade 3. My 12th graders were back at grade 3 in self-regulation. Oh yeah. They eventually, but they were also scattered in like grade 6 and grade 7. But until they had the whole learning of the whole year, I didn't see them. I saw them move incrementally throughout the year. So they could go on to college and sustain their life. There's always instructional plans with videos. Some Missouri teachers as well that have used this, as well as Amy's daughter and friends. You also have, everyone has a questionnaire and knowledge test. Each of the competencies have that. The questionnaire can range from multiple choice or I know, yes, no, true, false, probably 26 to 32 questions. You give it once in the fall with no lesson plan. You just hand it out or you take it online. Then you teach and you'll revisit it at the end of the year. It's the same questionnaire, just a different way. There's also a Padlet that will have this information. So I'm going to have the young men in the back. We're going to show you what the CCC framework looks like. So one of the things you'll see under resources, when you go to cccframework.org, under resources, you'll get this big chart, the 3 domains with all the competencies. If you don't like that, I'm going to have you just hover over time management, for example. See, you'll have it listed. It'll give you a PDF, a Padlet, and another PDF. However, if you don't like that little thing, they're all listed alphabetically underneath. So you can go down and get all of the competencies that are on the wheel are all right there. So if you stop at conflict management and you want this, here you go. They're the teacher manuals, all the PDFs. There's a poster that will be underneath it. So you get a PDF conflict management poster, the assessments, and the workbook, and it says for purchase. Like Mary Beth said, it's $16. Make one copy and then share. Didn't say that. So you can take that out of the taping. But they're all listed. So that's where you go for information. And that's free to anybody. So you can use that and see where we are. But that's a great site. And like I said, it has Padlets, and it'll say general information, then it'll have elementary, middle school, and high school. So all of them have a knowledge and questionnaire test. And again, we'll help you set that up so that you can see your results. And again, it's just very simple, yes, no, I know, rate this 1 to 5 kind of scale. Everyone is a little different. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And if you don't want them to answer the essay questions, you don't have to have them answer them. They're just open-ended questions. Again, they have the pre-K through 12 competencies. Again, what I did with my students, and when you see it, you'll understand, but they will have listed across. I had my students take it 3 times a year. So the first time I had them highlight where they were, which skills did they feel comfortable doing, and we did that in green and yellow first. Then like December, after we did it for a while, then I would have them look at it again, look at their form, go back through and color it in blue. And then the final one, I had them color it in pink or something. So I could see, and they could see their growth. Oh, I went from grade 2, and I even took off the grades. But I could tell. It was like, well, you're at grade 2 when we started, but now you're at grade 12 or grade 7. Look at the growth you made. This is what you can do if you continue. So again, it's just another way of looking at it. Again, the last one, I'm going to go back one. Forget it. I don't like dealing with that thing. But again, that is something that you can look at with the assessment on the VLP. If you have the PowerPoint, you can click on the link and it'll take you right there. So,
Again, you may have to get access from someone in your district because it does require sign-in. But again, it's meant for everyone. All right, we'll see if we can get it going. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about self-efficacy. Again, that is one of the competencies that we teach. It's one of the foundational competencies. Like Susan said, if you can purchase the lesson plan activities, and it's not really a lesson plan that you follow. It's activities that may make sense for you. We tell people that if you look at the book, it says junior high, high school, but there are things that you can really work at the elementary level also. Again, you will get a copy of this if you go to the full training, but if you don't, like I said, $16, and you can utilize it however you want. So when we talk about self-efficacy, what are we talking about? And then we know that sometimes with kids, we need to define what they mean because they might not understand what that word is. So it's important that as we start every lesson, it's what does this mean? So we have a common definition. It's an individual's perception about his or her capabilities to perform at expected level, achieve goals, and complete moderately challenging tasks. So again, these are the kids, we hear a lot that, the kids today, they give up really easily. If they get something wrong, they don't want to have to redo it. This is for those kids. That just tend to give up. They think they can't do something. They think they're just not good. Now, with every competency, we have what we call the components. And the chart are the components. And the idea is that the components are really the recipe. We don't really teach self-efficacy, but we teach the components. We teach them to focus on your effort, progress, and learning. And we teach them to take steps to increase your confidence and your abilities. And when you can do both of those things, we say that you have good self-efficacy. So the idea is that we really focus on both those components, and there are lessons and activities that go with each of those components. Switch back to this one. I can do that. Awesome. Oh, if I can get to going the right way, there we go. Like Susan mentioned, they have the sequence scale where they look at specific behaviors. You as a teacher, you might want to kind of rate your classes at the beginning and at the end to see that improvement. Because again, self-efficacy is one of those things that can't be really measured with a test. And it's nice to have specific skills that you're looking at. So you can maybe rate your class, you can rate maybe individual students on their self-efficacy, and then see what happens after you do the types of activities. We talked a lot about the tests. The tests, the items in the first section, in this case is items 1 through 24. It measures how they are on both components. And they'll get a score because we might find out that maybe we're really good at the first component, but not so good at the second. So you kind of need to know where to put your focus. You can get an overall class composite also. The knowledge test will tell you how much they know about that competency. And again, that's designed for kind of a pre and post if you want to do that. You don't have to do any of this. Again, the nice thing about this is whatever works for you, whatever makes the most sense for your class. These are written at the 5th grade level. They could be understood with kids who can maybe comprehend at the 3rd grade level if you read to them. So let that, kind of guide your decision. They have a really good video that tells you how to get your survey ready. I don't have really good self-efficacy in technology sometimes. I want it to work right the first time, doggone it. I don't want to have to figure it out. But it really does take you step by step through how to get it set up. Very easy, and it's free. All right. I always want to know, tell me how this works. And teachers want to hear from other teachers because, again, they're in our roles, they're in our shoes. So when we talked about teachers in Missouri over the last 2 years who taught self-efficacy, this is not research. This is not years of research from, big researchers who had big dollars and studied. These are what teachers said. And again, as we look at those things, are there any that we would not want to see for our students? As a parent, are there any that we would not want to see for our own kids? And one of the probably most unintended consequence of teaching these social emotional competencies is that teachers overall said, I improved. When I taught self-efficacy, my self-efficacy improved. When I taught self-regulation, my self-regulation improved. So again, it's one of those win-win things. Everybody gets better. I don't think you can be an educator that is alive in Missouri and not have heard of fixed and growth mindset. That's just been a really big topic. And again, in self-efficacy, we talk about fixed and growth mindset. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that we don't always hear that we don't have a total fixed or growth mindset. Sometimes we might have a fixed mindset in something and a growth mindset in something else. You think about taking on new tasks. When it comes to doing things, you might have a fixed mindset in one area, a growth mindset in another area, and talking about with students, making them understand what that means. So we give them the chart and talk about, if you have a fixed mindset, this is how you feel about skills. This is how you feel about challenges. This is how you feel about effort. And I think it's really important, too, as teachers. A lot of these activities are designed for you as teachers to tell your story. I will tell you, I did not grow up in a household with educator as parents or even any relatives. So I thought my teachers popped out of the womb fully formed with a grade book in one hand and a red pen in the other. You know, and it never occurred to me that my teachers struggled with anything. I thought they had it all. And so many of our kids think the same thing. And it's really interesting because, you know, it's great to tell stories about Patrick Mahomes and, you know, his self-efficacy and his self-regulation. You know, and they, you know, the young boys really get into that. But really, it's so much more effective if you tell your story. Because Patrick Mahomes is not in their life day in and day out, but you are. And so being able to talk about what fixed growth mindset is and what growth mindset is and how maybe you've struggled and what you've had to do. You know, my story is, in my family, I know it's a very rare gene. It's not found in many families, but we have the poor math gene. I don't know, maybe some of you have that too, but I think it's pretty rare. And we are just not good in math. I was fortunate when I went to college, I was an elementary education major, so I got to take like math for elementary teachers, addition, subtraction, multiplication, did not have to get into algebra. So when I was getting my specialist, you had to take statistics. And I had not had that math with letters and numbers since I was in high school, and I barely eked through at that time. And oh my gosh, my fixed mindset was, I can't do this. It's really hard. It's not my fault. But I really had to work hard to overcome that. I had a good friend taking it with me. She met with me every morning. And I think I had probably the lowest A possible. But I got that A and realized that if I worked, you know, I could. And you know, if I faced setbacks, if I would figure out what went wrong, I could do better. But my mindset in math had been fixed for a long time. I really had to work to overcome that. Research also says that there are 4 ways we can work on self-efficacy. And again, this is some of the lessons that are, or activities that are in there. The first one is mastery experience. As teachers, you know, when kids experience success for that first time, then it's kind of a building block. They're more willing to try. They're more willing to get better. So helping them have those first mastery experiences. And for some kids, it's really hard. You have to stop and think, look where you are. Look how far we've come. What are some things that maybe you couldn't do last year that you can do this year? And developing that log of things that they're able to do and realizing they have had some mastery. Because again, when you're struggling and you're on that struggle bus, you're not feeling very successful. So talking about them and having them write down their past successes. That's one of the most positive things. Another area is those vicarious experiences. Again, that's watching others be successful, hearing about how other people have struggled, and hearing about what they have gone through. And boy, if they can do it, I can do it kind of mentality. And again, that's where your stories are so very important. There's the idea of physiological feedback, recognizing what our body feels like when we are stressed. Recognizing, you know, what happens to us when we know we've got that algebra test and we're really stressed out. Being able to name those feelings and come up with ways to address those feelings, whether it be deep breathing, whether it be, you know, closing your eyes and counting to 5. Just being able to recognize that and understand that it's natural and have ways to address those things. And the last one is verbal persuasion, the idea of things that are said to us and that self-talk. What do we say to ourselves when we're stressed out? What do we say to ourselves when we're frustrated and we want to give up? I raised teenage daughters. I don't know if any of you have, but you probably had something you said to yourself. I said, this too shall pass, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. That is what I told myself. That was my mantra. That was my verbal persuasion that led me to believe that I would get through this period. So talking to kids about having a personal mantra, or maybe having a class mantra. In this class, we do hard things that they can say. You know, so those are 4 ways you can work on self-efficacy. with each of the modules, there are videos, and they're nice because they're videos of young folks talking about what that means to them, how they understand self-efficacy. Because just like teachers relate to teachers, kids relate to kids. And so sometimes it helps hearing from someone that they can kind of relate to, someone of their own age group, talking about what that means and how that helps them. So there's all sorts of videos like that sprinkled through the trainings. Oh, and we can't hear, but that's okay. We'll go on. So we're going to do a little fixed and growth mindset quiz just to see where you are, your understanding. So I'm going to read it to you, and if you think it is a fixed mindset statement, hold up one finger. If you think it's growth, hold up two fingers. And these mirror some of the activities that you'll have kids do, because again, they need to understand what those growth mindset statements sound like. So the first one, we probably won't get them all done because we need to move on. We've got lots to cover. The first one says, skills and abilities are something you're born with or you're not. Is that a fixed or a growth? Oh, you guys are so good. Fixed. You guys are gifted. Let's look at number 3 because that's kind of a tricky one. I'm good at reading, but I just can't do math. I'm seeing 1, I'm seeing 2. Fixed growth. That really is kind of fixed because, again, when you say I'm good at something, it's that you may have had a natural skill, but you've had to work at it. Because the idea, if you're just good at it, you don't have to work to get better. So we want them the idea of you always work. We always praise that effort. And then I can't do math. Again, we need to work on that mindset. We talk about the power of yet. Maybe you just can't do that yet. That doesn't mean you won't get there. All right, let's try one more. Okay, number 8, mistakes are valuable because we learn from that. Fixed or growth? Growth, oh my gosh, so don't we hate mistakes? But I tell you what, the bigger mistake, the more we learn. And so talking to kids about the mistakes is really important. Really hard sometimes because you don't want to admit that you've goofed up, but they can be so valuable for our students. So just begin thinking about self-efficacy. How can this help the students that I work with? I don't know.
I think self-regulation. Self-regulation is, again, it'll have the same thing. It'll have 8-lesson planning, or 8 lessons to teach it. Activities go with each one. And the big thing is understanding, again, that it's proactive. Not us telling them to do it, not telling your students you need to study. They also have to realize to study. Make a plan. Are you going to monitor that plan? Are you going to adjust it? Reflect on what worked. So my students at the high school level, we had the dreaded research paper that always came up in the spring. So you never saw your family at all. You just read all the time because I taught ELA. They make a plan. I gave them a schedule. I said, okay, here's the end date, so let's work backwards. What do you have to have all the way back to the front? Monitor it. Well, I'm on track. I got my cards in. I'm starting to write. And then all of a sudden, work called, and I had to work till midnight. I didn't get time to work on the paper. How are you going to fix that? Oh, I don't know. Kids would say, I don't know. I don't know. You got to monitor your plan, and you got to adjust it. So because you worked at such and such, and you didn't have time last night, how are you going to make up that amount of time to spend on it? Same thing it can apply to, and then you reflect on, at the end, is that the grade you wanted? Or is that the score you wanted? Or is that the time you wanted to have? So you can apply it to sports. I'm going to make a plan that I'm going to do this. I'm going to, I broke my hip at Christmas. So I've had to make plans on how I'm going to get back to doing my running, walking. So I've made a plan. I'm to the gym. I'm ahead of track. So I'm monitoring how many times I go, how far I go, how much time I spend on it. I'm adjusting as I don't feel good the next day or my hip hurts or whatever. I make an adjustment and I'll say, oh, I'll only do 10 minutes today and not 30. Or I'll only go 3.5 instead of 2.9, or I'll bump it down from 3.5 to 2.9. But I'll reflect on what works. So I give those examples because that's what our students need to hear. But they also have to have some reflection time on what worked. Is that working for you? So my plan is to do a 5K by Christmas. So I know it sounds like it's far off, but I just started. So 5K by Christmas. I got to monitor it, but I have an interim goal of doing like a mile and a half, 2 miles by July 4th. So that's coming up. So I've got to monitor that. So I'm on track. This conference is taken. I don't want to get up at 5 in the morning. I want to sleep. So I have to adjust. So I missed today's workout. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to do it this evening. So you've got to do that. And then will I reach my goal? I'll know July 4th. I'll know if I made it, if I could do 2 miles, and then I can work forward. So I'm self-regulating. We do it with banking. We do it with finance. We do it with weight loss. We do it with everything we do. Drinking more water instead of sodas. Eating healthier. You can give your students prime examples of things that you self-regulate. How much time we spend on the phone. How much time we're on the computer. Set a limit. Say, I'm going to stay off my phone. How am I going to do that? I'm going to put it where I can't reach it while I study, etc. So again, it's making those. Self-regulation, as Mary Beth said earlier, they're in all of the modules that we do. But again, what I did with my students for self-regulation is I covered up the pre-K through 12, and they would go, oh, well, I can make plans. I'm pretty good at that. I can avoid distractions, but I don't monitor how I'm doing over time. Well, that's something we got to work on. So again, they'd highlight 3 times a year, and then they could see how they did. Again, they all have a knowledge and questionnaire, a knowledge section. Again, you get those results, and you can do it by Moses code. You can do it by 1 through 28, and every kid in your grade book is 1 all the way down. It's however you want to do that, and do it by initials. But this is what teachers said. It improved their responsibility. It improved them making a self-reflection of what worked and what didn't work, and how can I make it better? What can I do the next time? Also, it improved their own abilities in what they were doing. It made, when I was with my students, I rarely had late assignments because we worked on turning them in on time, not just in my class, but some of the other classes that I shared students with. They made plans for successful outcomes. They made a delineated list. So you'd have, working with their social peers and having interactions. So for example, student gets a D on the test. I'd say, okay, how are we you're going to get to retake it, so what are you going to do differently? List me the steps. And they'd say, well, I'm going to study more. How many days a week? Where are we going to study? Are you going to put your phone aside? I mean, we made all these intricate steps, and then they would take it and they would get it a better score. And I'd say, okay, reflect on what did you do this past time that's better than the time before. Oh, I get it now. I can't just say I'm going to study harder. What's that look like? What's it sound like? Who's involved? So again, it works at things you already self-regulate. Talk to your students. Give them examples. Getting to school on time, active listening, keeping up with their classwork, tending to family, peers, assignments, chores. One of my students, and it's a quick one, He was a junior in my class. He was living on his own. He moved out from his parents. They got divorced. Dad was a druggie in jail. You get the drift. He was always late to class, always late to first hour, always. So he moved out, and I'd come back, and I'd said, okay, we got to work on this. He moved out, and he said, I'm late. And I said, you're late every day to first hour, every day. You're a chance of losing credit. You're not going to graduate with your peers. What can I do? Well, meet me after school. We're going to Kmart. Going to buy you an alarm clock, the big bell one, and you're going to put that sucker, well, where can I put it? I said, it's not by your bed. You're going to put it where you have to get up, walk, wake yourself up, and then you can go. If not, I'm calling you every day at 6 o'clock. You want me or the alarm clock? One of the two. So we did that. It worked. He was on time. He continued to be on time. I was like, okay, this is working. But it took some initiative for him to realize I have to make that. I can call you all day long. I can call you at 6 in the morning when I get up, or 5:30. What do you want, me or the alarm? I'll try the alarm. I was like, okay, you're not there, I'm calling you, and I'm going to come get your ass out of bed. I know exactly where you are. And he did that, and I said, just set the alarm, but put it away. Put it down in the bathroom, put it down in another bedroom, put it in the kitchen. I don't care. Put it in the oven, something that's going to rattle. And we checked and we monitored. We watched it. We saw him come back. We rewarded each other for him being on time. And we reflected on, okay, now that you've got the habit, what do we need to do now? What can we change and kind of go forward? So those are things that you can self-regulate with your kids that are having some issues. And again, okay, it worked, and no, it doesn't. We also have an emotional wheel that's in there. It's a feelings wheel. And so kids will say, I'm sad or I'm upset. Well, what does that mean? So we don't want to use those words over and over, but do I feel despair? Do I feel vulnerable? Do I feel empty? If I'm angry, am I mad? Am I melancholy? Those kinds of things. This is also available on the cccframework.org website. And again, it's playing with your emotional regulation. We're talking about school and credits, etc. But we also have to regulate our emotions. When we get angry, what happens? Do you get red faced? Do you cry? Are you happy you cry? Are you sad you cry? What is it? When's it appropriate for a group of people? So again, it's looking at what do you feel? What are you looking at? I don't like this clicker.
Hi, my name's Izzy.
Izzy is in there, and that is Amy's daughter, and she talks about a student. She talks about herself and what self-regulation means and what she does. And she takes it through every step. So you'll see Izzy on introduction of defining it. You'll see her through monitoring her plan. You'll see her through reflecting and making adjustments, and then self-reflection. Again, kind of a quiz you can ask. You realize you forgot to study for a test, so you cram for 5 minutes before. I know none of you have students that do that. Don't they come sliding in, just give me 5, just give me 5. I need it. Give me the test. Give me the test. So is that self-regulation? Yes or no? No. You have a big project that's due in a month, and your friend says, don't worry about it. We'll do it next week. So you decide to wait too. Is that self-regulation? No. But you write down your homework, and it needs to be complete, and you check it off as you finish it. Yeah. So it's just showing them little things that they can do to make themselves better. And I don't know, Mary Beth, you have the touch. Again, reflection, we are going to allow you to reflect. But again, think about how self-regulation can fit into your classroom and embed it in everything you do. So you have a big research project coming up in your science class. Begin with the end in mind, so work backwards. Because how many of your kids, even your own, like my personal kids, would come to me the night before, we need a tri-board. Not going at 11 o'clock at night. Sorry, Charlie. You're going to have to do with some poster paper. You know, those kinds of things. So again, it's self-regulation that's for everyone. We've all been there.
All right, I'm going to talk about assertiveness. And when we first started doing social emotional training a couple years ago, our first component that we covered, the first one we covered was assertiveness. And I was like, again, I had raised teenage girls. And I'm like, assertiveness? Oh, H to the no. I don't want assertiveness. My girls were assertive enough. A lot of teachers do the same thing when they hear we want to teach our kids to be more assertive. And so, again, when we look at the definition, we find out that really what it is, it kind of makes sense. Again, we have specific lessons. Here's the definition. Even when it's difficult, expressing your wants, needs, and thoughts while respecting others. Okay, I can get on board with that. And again, we have the two components. Even when it's difficult, express my wants, needs, and thoughts. And the second one, even when it's difficult, respect what others want, need, and think. And you know, we talk about we want them to be able to do both of those components. Because if you can just do the first one, the top one, even when it's difficult, express my wants, needs, and thoughts, and can't do the second one, we say you're aggressive. But if you can do the bottom one, even when it's difficult, respect what others want, need, and think, but can't do the top one, express your own, we say that's passive. And what we want for our kids is that sweet spot, that in between, where they can do both of those. And so again, I was very much more on board with assertiveness. Again, this one has the same sequence. You know, and again, I talk about the fact that if we had a child that never had reading instruction, we wouldn't balk at teaching them reading at a level below where we think they should be. Same thing for social and emotional skills. If they've never had that, and I say that kids from chaotic households have not had these skills modeled for them. Again, we have the same test. Again, I like the first section because, again, it gives me scores in the different areas. I can find out, and I probably already know who are the passive kids in class, who are the more aggressive kids in class, and kind of structure my assignments that way. And again, this is what teachers who did this saw. Teachers who went through the training saw these things, so they were able to see it quickly without years and years of instruction. I love the feelings word wheel, one of my favorite things that we had, because again, there are activities where we talk to kids about, you know, just because you feel one way, somebody might feel a different way, and we give them examples. How would you feel if you were the best player on the team? Some kids are elated, they're proud. Other kids are nervous. That's a lot of responsibility. So just understanding that people feel different ways about different things, and that is okay. And being able to respect that is really important for them to understand. So the idea of expressing those complex feelings, and the idea that emotions are not bad. We all feel emotions. It's important that we feel those emotions, but it's how we express those emotions. That's what really gets us in trouble or keeps us from, you know, ISS and those sorts of things. So being aware of how to handle those complex feelings and be able to name those complex feelings, and that not everybody has the same feelings we do in different circumstances. That allows us to kind of respect what they're going through. This is probably my super favorite thing of all, is the idea of the 3-part assertiveness statements. And I think how valuable this is for kids to learn how to ask for something in a way that's appropriate. To me, if you're working on doing kids being involved in self-directed IEPs, this would be a great thing to do again if they're asking for that accommodation or modification. The first part is that empathy statement. I understand that you have a lot of things going on. I understand, teacher, you are very busy. Then you're able to ask for what you want. But I'm really trying to improve my grade in my math class. You're giving that validation why you're asking this. And the third thing is direct statement of what you want to happen. Could you please grade my test early so I kind of know where I stand? So again, thinking about if a student walks into class and says, I want my paper graded now, or they say, I understand that you've got a lot of things going on. I'm really trying to improve my math grade. Could you please grade my test early so I know what to work on? Which one are they more likely to get what they want? So them understanding what it means to have an assertive statement, how that could be really helpful to them. I think this is just so valuable for kids, for adults. I think it's just a really great way to phrase things. Again, we hear from a counselor who did assertive training in her school, how it worked for her. And again, she had the kids teaching other kids. And it was a really, really powerful situation she did. And again, we won't go through this because I keep getting the sign of how many minutes we have left, and so we're kind of rushing through. But again, we're working with kids understanding what a passive, assertive, and aggressive looks like, what it sounds like, the idea that it's not just being loud. Maybe it's the looks you give, maybe it's the tone of voice, and being able to give them models of what passive, assertive, and aggressive look and sound like.
Okay, well, I think the last one is Intro to Conflict Management, and it really does follow the same format. I'm going to have you work this. Yes, I want your thumb, because it's a magic thumb. Again, there are 8 lessons with activities on each one. Components, we're going to go through this quickly. Know your usual response to conflict. Know the reasons for the conflict, and take steps to manage the conflict. So again, it has a sequence. Where are you on this scale? We also have the knowledge test. And again, these are things that were observed from various teachers. Improved behavior. We don't have behavior problems, do we? Oh, no, I didn't think so. But behavior, communication, healthier and improved and more meaningful relationships. But again, look that it increases an empathy and assertiveness. It also leads to more or better decision making and as well leadership. Its ability to work through hardships under stress. The sole purpose, though, is, I think, for conflict management is communication. Mary Beth had this in terms of conflict management styles. Are you a turtle who avoids? Are you accommodating? Oh yeah, I'll help you do that. Are you compromising all the time, taking part of the goals and persuading the others to help? Competing. She uses a shark for that. And then collaborating, the owl, who understands the goals and relationships. So again, you can have different conflict style managements or conflict management styles. You also have, I like the anger iceberg. We have the, here's the anger and you're really, really mad and you could punch somebody out. But instead, let's talk about what's causing that anger and going below the surface. So was it because you felt embarrassed in front of your friends? Was it because you made me feel bad about myself or my choice? So again, it's lurking. Were you nervous? And I'm angry because I'm nervous. It's a new situation. And I don't want to make a mistake. Regret or hurt or worried. So again, you can post that anger iceberg in your classroom and you can talk about it. Again, we have a teacher who videotaped herself as kindergarten. working on conflict management so it can work as early as kindergarten. Again, she provided instruction and facilitated the students' practice in doing conflict management. And then again, looking at, what conflict management style, which one would it be? And these are questions we would ask, which one are you? Or which style is it? What conflict is it? What management style? Did you avoid? Did you accommodate? Did you compromise, et cetera? So those are all within that presentation. And again, reflect on how you could do that. So quickly, we've done the 4 competencies, and then understanding why and embed. They're easy to embed in your daily classroom. And it doesn't even have to be daily. It could be every other day, once a week, during, my schools do it during advisory time or homeroom time if they're in elementary. And then where to find information. So you can go to the VLP, you can go on DESE, you can go to CCC Framework, you can contact Mary Beth or myself. So those are our numbers and our emails. And you're more than welcome to call, and we can help set up or, Zoom, however best fits your schedule. But we're willing and able to help you in any way we can, because we know this is such an important aspect. And so we thank you for being here today. So those are our numbers and our emails. And you're more than welcome to call, and we can help set up or, Zoom, however best fits your schedule. But we're willing and able to help you in any way we can.